Hey Kelly, how's it going today?
Hey, Jolene, I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, good. Nerding out as per usual. Who are we talking to today?
Well, we are talking to seriously one of the coolest people I think I know.
Mm,
One, you know her as well. We both know and love Heather. We are speaking with Heather Boddy today, and she is like one of the most ingenious entrepreneurs I think I know. I mean, I think a lot of us have created some really interesting and impactful businesses, but Heather brought a whole new level to this game.
yeah.
So she years ago she realized that she was in kind of a bad mental state when it came to her relationship with her body and with fitness and food and all that sort of thing, and she knew she needed to do something about it because it was not healthy, it was not good for her. She is certified in a ton of different types of workouts, and she'll talk about some of that in the episode. But what she did that I think is so smart is she brought together her, I don't want to say lack of love for fitness, but her struggles, I guess, with fitness with
Mm,
something that she absolutely loves, which is like fandoms and cosplay and all of that sort of thing, which, as we all know, is a huge part of the world, right? That
yes,
that really
yes.
gets into all those kinds of things. And she married the two together and created one of the coolest businesses. I think it's just amazing. So she's going to talk about that and just kind of how that all came about and all that stuff in her episode today. So I am so excited to listen to it.
Me too. I mean, yeah, like you said, Heather brought together two worlds that were so polar opposite of each other. She brought the geeks and the nerds together with the jocks and the fit guys, and she married the two in such beautiful fashion. And it is so much fun. I am also a client of Heather's, and it's a blast. And she just brings such a positive message to the world and to her clients that sharing Heather on this podcast and her community is so important and exciting for me. I think it's going to be quite the interview.
Yeah, I think so too. So let's dive right in. Hi there, villagers. I'm Kelly,
And I'm Jolene, and this is the Success Through Community podcast.
where we believe that solopreneur success really does take a village.
I see it really as the lifeline.
It's been essential in getting my business to where it is today.
We're talking with women just like you who know that the secret to their success is their community.
Have you found your village yet? All right. So, Heather, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We're so excited to talk with you. Jolene and I have known you for a while now, of course, so we know a lot about you, but we're super excited for our listeners to get to know more about you as a person, as a business owner, and your business. So, why don't we jump in with, why don't you tell us what was it that sparked your idea for your business? Tell us a little bit about your backstory and what kind of got you into business in the first place.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm also very excited to be here. Um, my journey to where I am in my business right now is a long and winding road. So I will say, I have my own workout program. I am a certified fitness professional. Um, and I'm located in New York City, but my business is virtual. So it takes place online. And I have a workout program for nerds called Geeknasium, where all of the workouts are themed in pop culture and fandom. And so they're like nerdy themed workouts. Uh, and if you would have told me like in my adolescence that I would be creating workouts for a living when I was grown up, like this is what you're going to do when you grow up, I'd be like, sure, yeah, okay. Because I was like the furthest from an athletic person growing up. And I guess I can go like all the way back, give you my whole story, which is that I grew up in a larger body. So I've like been a bigger girl my whole life. And what's kind of funny is that I grew up in a really loving and accepting and caring environment. And I know that there are large bodied people who grow up in not loving and caring environments. And so I feel very lucky that I was raised the way that I was. My mom was always like my weight was never commented on by my family members. And that's something that like now that I work in the industry and I talk to people about their relationships with their body, that's something that comes up a lot, is like family members saying something about their weight. And so I'm incredibly grateful that that was not the case for me growing up. I had a very loving, accepting upbringing. And I even went to a performing arts school from the grade of 4 to 12. So from the age of 9 to 18, I was at the same school. And we did performing arts, and I did everything from vocal music to acting to playing the clarinet. And growing up in an environment like that, I was surrounded by a ton of diversity. I was surrounded by many, many people who were different from me, and we were all seen as talented. And it's not to say that there wasn't still like cases of the cool kids and bullying and things like that. Like I did get bullied in middle school for like having a unibrow and wearing glasses and like that kind of stuff. But I don't think it was at the capacity that it would have been if I were at like a regular school. And when it came to like my body, it's like I knew that I was shaped differently. I knew that I was in a larger body, but it was never like a point of where I felt insecure about myself completely. And until I like started getting interested in boys, right? And then I was like, wait, all of my friends have a boyfriend. But also going to performing arts school, like all of the guys, not all of them, but like most of the guys are now queer. So, it's like it didn't have anything to do with what I looked like.
Nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with you.
Exactly. So it's just funny. I'm like, oh yeah, that guy I had a crush on, he has a boyfriend now, that kind of thing. And long story short, I wasn't faced with insecurity about my body really until college. And again, I was thrown into this environment where I went to a school in Ohio that had everyone was like a cookie cutter, same person. Like if you did not fit the mold, you were shunned. And I was lucky. I chose to live my freshman year in the creative arts dorm. So there's like a dorm where it was like all the creative arts kids were put in a place. And I found a group of women who are now some of my best friends who all had the same body type as me or similar body types as me. And I think we gravitated towards each other because we had never seen another woman who looked like us, sort of like, I don't know, thriving maybe is the right word. And so we banded together because we were going to school at this place where everybody looked the same. And we were very, very obviously different. And we kind of rode that wave. And, when you're 18, 19, sometimes you're like purposefully rebellious and you're like, well, I'm going to be so different. I'm going to be the rebel. I'm going to be, and we like really dove into that. And I think that's why I'm still friends with most of these people to this day, is because we went through that together. But it was the first time that I really started feeling very, very insecure about how I looked. Not to say that it didn't happen before. I would get comments from my peers in like high school. They would say things like, "Oh, you have really pretty eyes," or like, "You're pretty for a larger girl," always with that like qualifier at the end, like for a larger person. And those like microaggressions, so to speak, they really stuck with me all throughout college. And I really held on to them when I truly didn't fit in. And then I graduated. And I should say I went to college to be an actor. So I studied theater in college. I have a bachelor's in theater with a focus in Shakespeare and a minor in arts management. So that's what my degree is in. That's what I thought I was going to do with my life. And I moved to New York to be an actor after college. And what I had realized in high school I was in like the top acting program at high school. So you might not think that's a thing, but because I went to a performing arts school, there was a group called Drama Ensemble, and we acted, even though we were getting credit for school, we acted as an individual theater company. So it was like basically I was doing professional work, but through my high school. And we even stayed later, like the extra bells were like not actual bells in terms of like school hours. And I got really great roles in that. And I got really great roles in college too. So it wasn't anything about me not being talented. But what I realized when I moved to New York was that I had only ever played roles that were not necessarily age appropriate for me.
Oh
I was
my.
always playing like a grandmother or a mom or a maid or a nurse or a cook, something very matronly all the time, every time. And so moving to New York, obviously it's the real world. I'm going to auditions or trying to look for roles, and I'm not seeing anything that's remotely what I could go for. Like it's either young ingenue, like when you're 22, 23, pretty much the only thing you can play is like young ingenue or her best friend. Like that's all that was available. And I really, really struggled to figure out where I fit in the acting world once I got here, because I was like, oh, well, they obviously aren't going to cast me to play the mom, even though I'm really good at playing the mom. They're going to cast like an actual 47-year-old woman to play the mom, like, you know? So I don't know. It just like really was like eye-opening to me and really struck me. And that is where, so all of that to explain that like I would never have ever seen myself in fitness at any point in time. I was an artsy kid. The only thing that I did that was remotely athletic was I played soccer for the team at the school that I went to, and we cheered when we scored a goal as though we won like the World Cup, because it was the only goal that we had ever scored in like the years that we were playing soccer.
I love that. You should do
Yeah,
that for
we were
every
like-
goal.
So like I can remember it was my friend Tanya made the goal. We all screamed, and the other team was looking at us like, we're up by 12. I don't know why they're so. And it was like, but we were like, we've never scored a goal before.
Celebrate every win, right? Isn't that what we say?
Exactly.
Every win.
It was, yeah, I'll never forget that moment. I don't think we scored another after that either. And I did dance as well, which will come into play when I start to talk about what I do now. But basically I started a really negative relationship with fitness once my acting career wasn't going anywhere because of how I looked. And I know that the industry has changed. This was 10 years ago I moved to New York to be an actor, and the industry has changed. And I think that if I were 23 now and getting into the industry, I would be able to find a role for the body that I was in then, with the talent I had and what I looked like. I think
much different world now.
yeah, it's a little more open-minded. And like, or if I just were to start acting again now, I feel like there are just more roles available to more diverse people, ages, bodies, everything. But it wasn't like that 10 years ago. And so what I decided to do, because it was either lose weight so that you can play an ingenue, or change my personality so that I can play the really eccentric, like fat, funny Melissa McCarthy type. And that's like, I'm funny, but I'm not Melissa McCarthy, right? So it's like, I have a very different sense of humor. But because like her career was booming at the time, anytime someone came in the room who had a larger body, they were automatically compared to her. And it's like, gosh, well, I can't be Melissa McCarthy. I can do my darndest, but you're not gonna be pleased. So I went the route of trying to lose weight, and I was basically punishing myself at the gym, exercising super hardcore, because I didn't really know what I was doing. And I just like started running on a treadmill. I started like looking up on Pinterest, like exercises. It was just like what do people do with dumbbells? I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
I've been there. I get that.
yeah. And I remember being so just like miserable, just like so unfulfilled and unhappy. Um, that is until people started complimenting me for what I looked like. And that validation stuck in my body, like sunk into my body and was like, you have to keep doing this because people are noticing. I was not doing it for myself. I was saying people are noticing. And if people are noticing, that means you're on the right track. You're doing the right thing. And to be perfectly honest, I think what happened really was I moved from the Midwest to a city where you have to walk around all the time and like just sort of naturally gained an athleticism that I didn't have from being like a couch potato to like being someone who walked around a big city for hours on end. And I took that as like I took that and I felt superior with it, which is not okay. But because of the way that people treat you when your body changes, I thought that I was doing the right thing and I was on the right track. But it did not necessarily feel good. And then I started this workout program that you can do like at home because like I was running, I was lifting weights, and I was like, I have no core strength. I have no flexibility. So I need something that will give me that. And then this workout program, and I can say it because I teach it, it's called PIO. It was like brand new 10 years ago. And it was like an at-home workout program. And so I started doing it in the comfort of my own little tiny New York apartment. And I wasn't at the gym. I didn't feel intimidated. I didn't, whatever. And then doing the moves that are required in PIO, they're very difficult. They're very complicated. And it's kind of like yoga, but choreographed to music. So it's like you're doing a flow, but there's a rhythm to it. And it was really cool. And also I liked the trainer. It was Shalene Johnson who created it. And it was the first time that I was working out and I actually felt like I was in my body while I was working out. Like I was like, oh, I'm like here, I'm present, I'm moving. This is what it should feel like. And it felt right. And that was sort of me thinking like, well, then why was I doing anything else? Like what was that all about? And then at the same exact time as starting that workout program, I had also started reading the She-Hulk comic books, which you two know all about my relationship with She-Hulk. But for the listeners, She-Hulk is the Hulk's cousin. She is a female superhero who has complete and total control of her intellectual side when she hulks out. So unlike the Hulk, who when he gets angry, he turns into the Hulk and he has no control over his emotions. He's just kind of like a big giant toddler smashing things. But Hulk smash. But She-Hulk, she actually has complete and total intellectual control when she's in her Hulk form. And I thought that was cool. I was like, oh, she's so strong. And the other thing about her is that she can control her ability to Hulk out, which is not the same with the Hulk. He would like get angry and turn into the Hulk. But She-Hulk, her name is Jennifer Walters, she can turn back into her Jennifer Walters form or Hulk out and go to her She-Hulk form by choice. And she chooses to stay in her She-Hulk form because she feels strong and empowered in that larger, bright green body. And I thought about it while I was reading it, and I was like, that's interesting that she like chooses to stay different, like giant and green. And it was kind of like the first time in media that I had seen a woman choose to like purposely be strong and different rather than like conform to what society expects of her. And she's also just like so strong. And another thing about She-Hulk, the way that I discovered her is that I was flipping through a Marvel encyclopedia. And I was being my petty self and was looking for a superhero who weighed more than like 120 pounds, like a female superhero. I was like, because I feel like if you're a superhero, you got to have muscles. And like, if you've got lots of muscles, you're going to weigh more than 120 pounds. Come on.
Yeah.
So I was flipping through this Marvel encyclopedia to all the female superheroes. And then I got to She-Hulk's page and she like weighs like 675 pounds or something. And I was like, whoa, that's more like it. That's my girl. And it just so happened that when I discovered her, there was like a run of She-Hulk happening. So like in comics, like they do these things called runs where they'll release issues kind of like episodes of a TV show. So you get like one issue a week for a certain amount of time until they cancel it. And so there was a run happening of She-Hulk right when I discovered her, and I completely and utterly fell in love. But it also changed the way I showed up in my workouts. I would channel her when I was doing PIO, and it felt so much better than anything I had ever done before. And it was the first time I actually looked forward to working out. It was the first time I felt at home in my body while working out. It just felt so incredible that I decided to become a certified fitness professional because of it. I was like, first of all, if I can't be an actor because they don't know what to do with me, I'll get certified to teach PIO. I'll get hired at a gym and I'll show people that they can do this too. If I can do it, you can do it, basically, is like how I got started in the fitness world. And I know this is like really, really long-winded. I'm almost done with my story, I promise.
It's a good
No,
story.
it's
I'm
great.
learning a lot about you that I had no idea, like the performing arts.
Oh, yeah.
I knew you were an artist, but I had no idea it went that deep. So
Oh, yeah.
please
I can
continue.
sing, y'all. A lot of people don't know I can sing. The kids I babysit are always like, will you sing? I'm like, I don't want to. Yeah, like people in the cosplay community who meet me now, they're always like, until they like know, they're always very surprised because I love karaoke. I love doing a good karaoke. And for my birthday this year, I did like cosplay karaoke. I made everyone dress up as a character in order to come. And then I made them sing a song that their character would choose to sing. So like not what they wanted to sing, but what would your character choose?
Awesome.
And I feel like every single time there's like a new person who's like, oh, I didn't know you could sing. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll get there. We'll get to cosplay. We'll get to all of that. Basically, so I started my career in fitness and I totally was right back where I started with acting and felt like I didn't fit in because I was in a larger body. And luckily I got started at this gym where the group exercise director, the group fitness director, she was also in a larger body and she had like bright purple hair. And it was like, we just like jived. And she was the first woman who hired me kind of like right out the gate. I think I got certified in PIO in May and I was working at a gym by June. So it was like really quick turnaround.
Wow.
I got lucky. That does not always happen. And I was getting feedback from one of my mentors who like had been certified in PIO before me, was giving me feedback of sort of like, these are the things you need to work on. And one of those things was anatomical cueing, which is like how your body should be moving and where you should feel things. And because she gave me that feedback, I hammered it so hard into my learning that now it's like one of my special skills is like, I always, whenever I learn a new workout move or like whenever I'm choreographing something new, the first thing I focus on is that anatomical cueing. Like, oh, if you're doing a squat, you should sit your hips down and back, keep your core engaged, keep your chest lifted, and you should feel it in the glutes in the back of your legs. Like that's like always the first thing that comes out of my mouth now, which I think is pretty interesting. Even though when I first got the feedback, I was like, stop it. I'm perfect. I'm not doing anything wrong.
That's what I'm doing.
But yeah, so I got hired by the gym and then I was just thrown into this industry where you are only seen as having value if your body looks a certain way. And I still get comments on the internet to this day where people are like, you're not a fitness professional. You don't have abs. Like you're fat. You can't be. And like, people don't want to hire you if you don't look how they want to look. And I'm like, that's not true. That's not true. And so from that, I kind of like, one part of the story that I forgot to say is that I also became a Beachbody coach, which like is only relevant because you asked like how I got the idea for my business. I I used to be a Beachbody coach because I loved PIO so much, and that was a Beachbody program. And we all know Beachbody is a multi-level marketing scheme, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I did it for like 3 years. And I loved it while I was doing it. But what I did while I was in the coaching world of Beachbody is that I would gamify the workouts. And my group was called From Muggle to Magical, which is like a Harry Potter thing, right? And I would get people to buy these Beachbody workouts. And then I'd put them in my Facebook group called From Muggle to Magical. I would sort them into a Hogwarts house, and then I would put them into groups from there, and we would do little things where they would get like house points and things like that basically like gamified them doing the Beachbody workout program. And I found that one of my skill sets was bridging the gap between being a nerd and doing fitness, because I was both. And I also I think that fitness can be such like a daunting thing. It's like a hump that you need to get over. And I never wanted anyone to experience what I had experienced, which was going because I hated myself. And I want people to go because they want to feel good. So I gamified all the stuff when I was a Beachbody coach to make it less like, hey, we're doing a Beachbody workout, and more like, no, we're doing this fun Harry Potter nerd group thing together that also just happens to be Beachbody workouts, right? And I discovered through doing that was one of my special skills that I had. So being in the world, being a fitness professional, going through the body image issues I was going through for pretty much the first time in my life, and developing eating habits that were not great because Beachbody sort of like it encourages portion control. And then Shalene Johnson, who started PIO, she started this diet program called, I can't remember what it was originally called, but they changed the name to Phase It Up. And it was basically like keto on steroids. And so I was getting sucked into this like diet mentality. And I was like, the smaller I get, the more valid I will be as a fitness instructor. And it's like I kind of got away from how I felt when I first started, when I first felt that spark to like get started. And so I started a podcast called Love Your Bod, where I would work through my own issues with body image, but also discuss body image with other people and just sort of be like, what's your story? And I remember I had like a coaching call with a mentor of mine, and they're like, oh, you want to talk about monetizing Love Your Bod? Let's do it. And I was like, actually, I just kind of got this vision. Like, what if I did what I was doing with Beachbody, but it's my own workouts? And she was like, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And then the name just kind of came to me. Geeknasium just kind of came to me because it's, again, like a geek, but in the gymnasium, like putting those two things together, which I will say, going back to performing arts, I only had to take gym one semester all 9 years that I was at that performing arts school. One semester.
Go to the wrong high school.
I was gonna say, man, I should have been in that kind of school.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like kind of like, we probably should have had gym more than one semester in 9 years, but also I only had to take health one semester of all 9 years. Wild. But anyway, so that's where the idea for my business came from. I was taking pieces that I knew were good, like my special skills from being a Beachbody coach, but getting rid of the multi-level marketing, making it my own thing, and also taking the diet culture out of it and making it more holistic rather than like you have to lose weight in this workout program. So that was like the 35-minute answer to your first question.
No, it was so great though, because like, I mean, for one thing, you touched on so much that we would have eventually asked you anyway. Yeah. So that was all fantastic, but it was also so entertaining. Like I knew almost all of that about you, but yet, yeah, Jolene didn't, but like, I mean, you and I, we've known each other a smidge longer than you've known Jolene, so that's probably why. But at the same time, like, it was still incredibly interesting to me to hear it all sequentially, how it happened, because I know those as bits and pieces, not how they actually all happened. And I think it makes so much sense. Like, you are exactly where you should be, doing exactly what you should be doing, and it's so clear when you look at that story.
Yeah.
How every single piece of that, you know, from the childhood aspect of it, where you didn't deal with those types of, you know, judgments from family or even really at school. I think the fact that you had that background really set you up to be in a place where you knew what that should feel like, right?
Yeah.
I think people who experience that judgment their entire lives, like, they would never have even thought to do something that you're doing, because as far as they know, that's normal. That's life, right?
Yeah,
So
that's exactly it. I mean, I did not grow up in that type of environment. I grew up where my weight was always a topic of discussion. Are you sure you should be wearing that? Maybe you should be doing this instead. You have the perfect voice to be on an operator. Like, I was not to be seen, only to be heard, right? And that was all due to my weight. So growing up in an environment where weight wasn't an issue, it seems that it really did put you in a position where, because you did go through body issues, you did go through the shame, you did go through the hate, and all of the things that most people of bigger bodies tend to go through. But you were able to come back and get into that Love Your Bod, which, you know, I know that your podcast didn't start out the way it is now, but you're in a position now and you're in the right mindset that it isn't about weight loss. It isn't about anything but moving, being healthy, and loving who you are. But most importantly, and I can speak from experience on this, it's about having fun while you're doing all of that, right?
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that. And that's why I'm so excited you're here today, because I think your message and your voice is so important and needs to be heard. I even pulled out my Harry Potter scarf. So excited you're here today. I mean, so when you said, you know, muggle to magical, I'm like, oh. The thing is I think it's absolutely, you are in the right spot, and you took the long way around to get there, but you got there, and you have to go through the phases to get where you are. And I think that's amazing. But I have a question, and that is, what was the biggest obstacle when you did come to that position and you wanted to start Geeknasium and start this message of quit the dieting, love who you are, start moving and start having fun, and you created Geeknasium after all of what you've learned? What was the biggest obstacle for you getting going?
Getting going was easy, I would say, because I was like, okay, let's get a test group going. I've got these people to join. And I had a lot of like trial and error. I had like most of 2019 was like trial and error, where I was working with people who either I invited them and they paid nothing, or they paid like a small fee to be in and just like give me feedback on the workouts or tell me how they wanted the program to be formulated. And like originally it was going to be a 6-week program that I would launch continually, but I realized really quickly that that was not within my energetic capacity. Like, I can't continually launch a 6-week program. Like, that's just not where I'm at. And so I was like, what if I made it a monthly membership? And I've just been continually adding to the program since then. There are now over 100 workouts in the library. And, you know, some of those workouts are the very first workouts that I recorded with that test group, because they're still really great workouts, even if they're like a little, like they're filmed in a gym and like kind of echoey and not perfect lighting and things like that. Like, still a good workout. So I kept them in the like rotation of the library. But I would say like since starting, I think it was like the excitement of starting a new business was really great. And I felt like I had this like upward trajectory. But what really started to become a struggle for me was getting those clients, like, because finding people to be in the test group was easy, because again, it was like either by invite or a low fee, where it was almost like, in exchange, I just need for you to give me information and feedback. And some of those people who were in the test group did convert into clients. And that was really cool to see. And then one of them has been with me for so long. So something that I do struggle with is seeing seeing the big picture and actually believing that it's possible. That's what I really struggle with, is like, I want Geeknasium to be huge, and I want there to be so many nerds who have a membership, and I want it to be something that, like, if a nerd brings it up, like, oh, have you heard of Geeknasium? Someone will be like, yes, of course I've heard of Geeknasium. Like, have you done the X workout? Like, that's the level that I want Geeknasium to be at. But I think I really struggle to actually see that happening because I'm so far away from that goal. And I think I'm like slowly getting there. But I have a client who, whenever I'm feeling super sad about where Geeknasium is or who's going to find it, I have a client who was with me when I started in those Beachbody days, and I was doing From Muggle to Magical. And he was always posting his sweaty selfies, is what we call them, like a picture of you right after you work out. Always doing the recipes. And so he was one of the first people I asked when I was like, okay, I'm not doing Beachbody anymore. I'm doing my own thing. Do you want to come with me? Do you want to try this test group? And he is still with me to this day, like as a member. He's taken maybe like one break. He like took a little break for a short period of time. But I have a friend who tries to remind me of this too. She's like, just think about him when you are feeling so like, because like I changed his life, and like it sometimes saying that out loud is like, who, me? But it's really true. Like, I changed this kid's life, and he has such a great, healthy, happy, fun relationship with fitness, and he shows up in the group gung-ho every time. If I ever do a live workout, he always tries to be there. For any of the community events we do, like sometimes we do coffee chats about Marvel movies or like watch parties, he's always at those, enthusiastic. And it's like, this is my perfect ideal client. He's been with me. I think I've known him now since 2015 or 2016. No, I guess that would be it. 2016. So it's been a really long time. And to see how much he's grown in that time is just really impressive. And so like thinking about that client helps me sort of go, well, I just need more of him. Because once Geeknasium reaches that person who needs to see it, they are going to go the same trajectory that he did.
Yeah, serving, right? And serving everybody else and helping them. And that's kind of why we do it. That's why that feeling of watching that growth and that success story. I love that.
Yeah. Well, it's so great that like you literally have that specific person that you can go back to, because I think a lot of us can come up with, and we do as entrepreneurs, one of the exercises we all do in some capacity is identifying your ideal client or your ideal client avatar or your dream client or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
We sometimes go, and Heather, you know, as an actor, you get this too, but like we sometimes go so deep into the backstory of that person that like we know what they ate for breakfast, okay, and they don't exist. And you know, that's useful. Obviously, it wouldn't be done by so many people if it wasn't a useful exercise. But to have a living, breathing human that is that, literally, is such a huge benefit because, and I'm sure by now he's someone you would consider a friend as well, because you don't go that long with somebody without it turning into some level of friendship.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's great because on some level, like when you are really struggling, beyond just thinking about him and knowing what you've done and what impact you've had in his life, you can also like directly ask him questions.
Yes.
You know, hey, I'm thinking about doing XYZ. How would you feel about that? Because that exponentially translates to the rest of your demographic, really. Which I think is awesome. And I need to find that person for my business because that's such a huge treasure to have something like that. I mean, there's only so much you can get from getting feedback from people who aren't exactly that client, who maybe, I mean, I know like you're a part of our mastermind, which we're so thrilled to have you in there. But like the feedback you get from our group is one aspect of it, but it's never going to be exactly the same as what someone like him can tell you and the insight that they can give you. And I think that's so huge. I mean, feedback for an entrepreneur is everything, really getting somebody else's perspective, because it's so easy to get so one-sided from how we see something and how, we think, oh, this is going to be amazing, everyone's going to love it. And then you say it to someone and they're like, I don't know, what about XYZ? And it's like, oh crap, I didn't even think about that. Like we so need that. And it kind of leads me to this question that we're asking everyone, because obviously this is called the Success Through Community podcast. So beyond simply wanting to know more about our guests' businesses and their backgrounds and all of that, we want to see and understand the impact of your community. And in a lot of ways, it's communities, I'm sure, because that's kind of come up a lot. Like there's not just one, but just the impact that the support of your communities have had on your business and helping you get to where you are right now. And I think to an extent you've answered that a little bit with that client, but can you kind of go a little deeper on that, on some of your other communities maybe, and how you can look back and see them supporting your success?
Yeah, I mean, I think throughout my life, I have always been supported by community. The community that I grew up with at school, that little community I created in college. I think personally, I thrive in community, and it is like one of my sort of values or personal pillars that when I created Geeknasium, the first thing I thought of was like, I would like to create a safe community for nerds to explore fitness. Like that is what I'm looking to do here. And as I've become an entrepreneur, I've sort of discovered the ways that you can have community as an entrepreneur. And I think that without community support, my business would not exist, especially in terms of like getting feedback, because not only is it easy to like get in your own head about stuff or get stuck on market research, but also, I have like ADHD, and it can be really hard for me to like hold myself accountable for things. And there are just some times where not that I don't want to, or not that it's not important, but I just don't get things done because my brain is just like, meh, we're not going to do that now. And so it's been pretty like essential in getting my business to where it is today, and to also pushing it to grow, because I think without community, I also would have probably just been like, well, we're not doing Geeknasium anymore, everyone. But I also I'm part of the cosplay community, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, like cosplay is dressing up as fictional characters for fun. Costume play is what it is short for. And I've discovered, like, since I've become part of the cosplay community, there's so much support there as well for what I do. And I remember maybe like a year ago, or a little longer than a year ago, I was feeling so torn in two different directions in terms of like what kind of content to post. Because I'm like, I can't post fitness stuff because my cosplay people don't like it. And I can't post cosplay stuff because the people who follow me for fitness don't like it. And it's like, I can't figure out how to make this work. And I was like experimenting, and I was like, well, what if I just got into cosplay and talked about fitness? Or like, what if I used a nerdy audio, but made the words actually like a metaphor for something in fitness? It's like, it's already something I'm relatively good at doing, like when it comes to the workouts. So maybe I can do it with content too. And once I sort of put those two things together, my content started resonating with multiple people. So like the cosplay people who only followed me for cosplay are now like, oh, she's in cosplay, but she's talking about fitness. And then the fitness people would be like, oh, she's talking about fitness, but she's in cosplay. And it was like a good way to like bridge the gap between those two different communities who now, no matter what I post, whether it's, you know, me in cosplay talking about fitness or me doing a workout, like whatever it happens to be, there's always so much support. And now that I've noticed I've been invited to speak at New York Comic Con for the past couple years, the people who will share my posts or say like, go see this panel or that kind of thing, like that always means a lot to me too, because like just having that support, it helps validate that like I'm doing the right thing. Like I know I should be able to validate that on my own, but actually having that external validation, it feels like I'm steering myself in the right direction. And I think on the flip side, when I was getting like negative validation, like validation that didn't feel good, it's like a sign that I was going in the wrong direction, right? Like this kind of validation doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. These are not the type of people who I want to surround myself with because they're telling me something that doesn't sit well with me. Whereas the types of communities that I've cultivated for myself now, it's very much like the support is there, but it's also a support that is constructive. It's not just like blind support where it's like, we'll support you no matter what you do. Like I posted on Halloween, I posted something about how I was offended by anyone who didn't have their baby dressed up for Halloween because Halloween, like babies dressed up on Halloween is so cute. And someone in my community commented and was like, well, not all babies can dress up. And it was like this post about autism and like sensory stuff. And I was like, you're right. That is an absolutely valid point. And I didn't think about that when I said what I said. But it's like there's accountability in community sometimes, not just the accountability of like, you know, I'll show up and do things, but also people holding you accountable to like a standard of like the types of things that you're actually saying and what are you putting out in the world.
And your message has, because you have such a valid point there, because when your message has value and you are being steered by your values, it's your community and it's the people who are part of that community are going to hold you to those values. So for that person to come out and say, well, whoa, wait a minute. I know all babies are cute when they're dressed up, but not all babies can, and not be offended and not bark at you and try to cancel you and all of that, what is so common nowadays, just goes to show the importance of having the right community and a strong community with anything and everything you do. And I think that's amazing that you're able to build one in a community, because you said earlier something that really struck a chord with me was, and I quote, it was a safe place for nerds. And I am of the generation where you would never have heard that in a sentence ever. Not in, unless it was like locked in a computer room away from everybody else. Now, a safe place for nerds to explore fitness and athleticism, that's huge. Like that is, again, my generation, it's uncommon. Nerds and athletes, they were polar opposites. It's not something that you can connect together. But when you are able to bring that together and bring all of those people together, I think it's pretty darn special, if you ask me.
Thanks.
I love that you have Geeknasium, which is, as you put it so eloquently, a safe place for nerds to explore fitness and to love their body. You also have the podcast, Love Your Bod, which we touched on a little bit. And I know we're keeping you a little longer than anticipated, but I would love to hear more about Love Your Bod a little bit. And for you to tell us where we can find you and Geeknasium and Love Your Bod, the podcast, because I think it's gold, pure gold.
Thanks. Well, so Love Your Bod, I started Love Your Bod and I really like started it at the beginning of my fitness career and at a point where I was at a crossroads with acting. And I was just like, because I was leaving the acting industry based on my body, like based on how I looked. I kind of wanted to talk to people about it publicly, not just be like, woe is me, I'm leaving because a casting director literally said to me, I think you're talented, but I've never seen a casting breakdown that you'd be good for.
Ouch.
Okay, thanks.
So that
So
speaks more about the industry at the time than it does about you.
yeah, but like
Who's
at the
writing
same
the breakdowns, not you.
but at the same time, it's like, so basically I'm unhireable. Cool. Like, bye. So what I wanted to do was just like have conversations with people about body image and how the arts and media affect body image. And I was mostly interviewing like artists and athletes to see like how being in the artistic industries has affected their body image. Because on one hand, I grew up in this diverse artistic community where we embraced everyone. And then on the other hand, I go into that industry professionally and all they care about is how I look. So it's like I was raised to believe one thing and then I actually get there and it's something totally different. And I think the difference is like when you're in that school environment, it is more of a community, like we've been talking about. Like it's definitely more of a community and you work with your talent pool and you can't like just go hire an actor from LA to come in and play, you know, the leading lady or whatever. You have to work with who you have and the directors and the students are all working on it together. So it's definitely more of a sense of community. Whereas in the professional world, it's about making money and who's going to sell seats and, you know, basically who's pretty, who do we want to look at? And like, you know, not to say that anyone of any particular size is prettier than another, but societally it has been made a standard. And that was frustrating and I wanted to talk about it. So that's where I started Love Your Bod. I was also deep in the trenches of diet culture when I started Love Your Bod. So one of the things I talked about a lot in the early episodes is how I had lost weight and how I was so much happier now that I was smaller and how like, and it's not true. It's not necessarily true. I think like part of me felt better because I was just generally more accepted in society, which is like sad to say. And I was also dating a very hot guy for the first time in my whole life. And he was not a good person, by the way, which just, again, goes to show that like, just because you look a certain way, you also might attract a certain type of person. And like, so I think like there were just parts of my life that felt incredibly validated by the hard work I put in. So I was preaching as though I was doing something right and I was in such a much better place, even though I truly wasn't. And one of the darker sides of Love Your Bod that's not evident in it is that like I was talking about how happy I was but I was actually the most miserable I've ever been. And I think Love Your Bod was sort of like a therapy for me in those earlier episodes because that guy I was dating was pretty emotionally manipulative. And I was also out of a babysitting job at the time. So I was teaching as many classes as I could. I had up to like 16 classes a week and I was doing my own workouts on top of that. And all the classes I teach, I do along. It's not like Orange Theory where I just like tell everyone what to do. All of the classes that I teach, I like physically do along with my students. And so 16 classes a week, plus my own workouts on top of all of that, plus doing that extreme diet that I told you about earlier, where I was definitely not getting enough calories and I was not eating carbs at all. So I was tired all the time. I was grumpy all the time. I was in that emotionally manipulative relationship. It was just like a really dark time for me. And I remember when we broke up, I was like, is it because I gained weight? Because I had gained like 5 pounds or something. And it was like, what was happening is that I was coming out of that, like, I was like, I should eat more because I almost passed out while I was teaching one night. Like I truly like got lightheaded and had to stop. Yeah, it was not healthy. Exactly. Like everybody preaches health, but then some of the things that you have to do to look a certain way, especially if you're genetically predispositioned not to look a certain way. Like my body was not supposed to look how it looked in 2017. I was doing very extreme things to look that way. And so what happened was I had that little wake up call and I started eating more and I started gaining weight. And then when that asshole broke up with me, it was like, oh, it's because I'm gaining weight. And it was not directly correlated to that. It's because he knew that he was being horrible to me and he felt bad about it and was like, okay, we can't keep doing this. But I didn't know because I was like, all I could think about was food and my body. So anyway, basically, Love Your Bod has a dark undertone in some of the episodes. And that's why I took a break from it for a couple years, and I just recently relaunched. And you can find it. It's a play on my last name. So it's Love Your Bod with 2 Ds because my last name is Boddy. So it's Bodd. And it's available anywhere that podcasts are available. So you can find it on Apple Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever people listen to podcasts. And there's also an Instagram account. It's love_your_bod with 2 Ds again. And then for Geeknasium, I have a Geeknasium Instagram. It's just at Geeknasium, which is spelled Geek Nasium. How do you spell Nasium? And
it'll all be in the show notes. You don't have to
great
a spelling test.
Wonderful. Yeah.
I love your comparison there about the dark undertones of Love Your Bod. And as you were talking, it reminded me so much of early Oprah. Do you remember when Oprah was there and she was always about getting skinny? And there's that big episode where she came out and she was rail thin and unhealthy. And it was just not okay. And then she turned around and she found herself and she found her love and she learned how to love herself and her body. And now look at her soar, right? And I think that the dark undertones of Love Your Bod and the podcast and the direction it is going now, which you talked about, is a beautiful direction. And I think that it's something that anybody who is into cosplay, into health in general, and into just looking for a little bit more confidence and a little bit more on how to love themselves, I think it's a great podcast for our listeners to definitely tap into. So like we said, we'll have everything in the show notes, but thank you so much for that.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us and for, just you can hear, anyone who's not watching can hear the passion behind everything that got you into this industry in the first place and into the specific aspect of this industry. And I do want to note for anyone who maybe is interested in trying Geeknasium and things like that, number one, it is fun, but it will kick your butt. So don't think that this is like, oh, I'm just going to go have fun and move. No, you will be tired and you might be cursing at Heather a little bit throughout. But
I cursed a lot of it. Right? A lot of it.
Okay. They speak from experience. Yeah.
It was an adventure, let me tell you. Yeah, I love it.
It will so definitely work you. But I also want to point out, and Heather, I don't know if you want to tell people just briefly, like how, if there's an easy way to tell them, or we could just put it in the show notes, but there is a way to kind of try before you buy, right? There's a way people can test it out. So why don't you tell them a little bit about that real quick?
Yeah, I have a 14-day free trial for Geeknasium. So basically you can try it out for 14 days. If you don't cancel before 14 days, you will automatically be charged. So just like if you don't like it, cancel it. But if you do like it, stick around. But basically you get access to the full workout library, which currently I have uploaded over 80 workouts. And you also get access to a private Discord community. I took everything off Facebook. I was like, get out of here. So now we use Discord. And there's a section for accountability where you can post like I want to do this amount of workouts this week. There's a section for sweaty selfies, like I mentioned before. We also do little coffee chats and things like that, where it's just, again, to build community. It's like, this doesn't have anything to do with working out, but we'll talk about Black Panther because that just came out or whatever. And with that 14-day trial, you get access to everything. Unfortunately, the link is like long and not something I can just say. So I will have that linked for you in the show notes, but it's 14-day full unedited, like unrestricted access to the workout program.
That's amazing. That's super generous, because as a tech person and someone who's often in free trials for tech, that's rarely how it works. Or they'll give you that full access, but for such a short amount of time that you don't really get to evaluate if it's right for you or not. So I think what you're doing makes so much sense. And it really, I mean, 2 weeks is a super long time if you're really jumping into that trial and testing everything out. I think that's really cool. So, well, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to cut it here because this is already probably our longest episode, but I think it's honestly, it's so good. So I'm not going to cut anything out of it.
I like to hear myself talk, if you couldn't tell, I guess.
We like
But
listening.
you say wise and entertaining things.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bother me at all.
I mean, and
Yeah.
the great thing too, Heather, is you covered everything we wanted to ask you
Yep.
in your stories. So it was just wonderful to just sit here and be engaged with you being you and telling your story.
I guess that's also what it is like, I am a podcaster too, so I know how to paint the picture for the listeners.
Exactly. Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. We will see you around. And again, everybody, show notes. We'll have everything you need to find Heather because she's worth finding. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us this week on the Success Through Community podcast.
Where our goal is to support female solopreneurs through community.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, make sure you check out the show notes for links, transcripts, and so much more.
And be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to the podcast.
Ooh, and don't forget to mention us to your community,
And if you can't wait for the next episode, be sure to join us on Patreon.
where our community is made possible by listeners like you. So thank you so much for your support.
Until next time.